guys, here we are again.
Yes, sir.
Equity Accelerator podcast. I don't know.
Love it.
We started at the beginning of 2019 and we've been doing it once a week like clockwork. So good to see you again.
As always.
And today's topic is interesting because actually most people who listen to this podcast may or may not know this, but you and I years ago had a coaching relationship. I hired you to be my productivity coach, my business coach. You're a real estate. You have a real estate background. You ran a real estate team years in the past. And so you know all about how to create a real estate team. And, you know, in the mortgage business, a lot of the same tactics apply. But you and I share a love of personal development, personal improvement.
I think we're deep dudes. I think we think about things that have substance and matter.
Yeah, but we also are looking for ideas and ways to improve and ways to improve ourselves. But, you know, and you were asking me like, hey, what's a good personal development topic that we can talk about? And my response was, you know, I don't know. I think I'm not as good at personal development as a lot of people in this business. Or I'm certainly not as good as at signaling it, you know, signifying how much personal development I'm doing.
Yeah.
With like social shares and, oh, I'm reading this book and crushing it or whatever.
Right.
But I do enjoy, there are some books that knock me out every now and then, there's seminars that I like to go to in the mortgage business that are really exciting. But we hooked in on something. I said, it comes in waves with me. Like I'll get really excited about personal development for a few months and then I'll kind of slow down so maybe I'll just get busy with my life and I'm not as disciplined about improving myself at a given time. But I have definitely dabbled in the dark arts of personal development.
Dark arts.
And I know you have too.
I have. The first thing I want to say about what you just said is that, and this is what, again, in our last episode, we talked about you being a contrarian, like just that what I appreciate about you is that it doesn't always look one way. Like, I think everybody thinks like, we talk about personal development. It's like, oh, like, maybe I don't do it right, or I don't do it enough. What does it look like? What is personal development supposed to look like? Says who? Who's the authority on what personal development looks like? So that your boom and bust on it is perfect. And when you said that before we hit record, I loved it because I feel like there's a lot of people who feel like they're not good enough because they're not doing it the way they think they're supposed to do it. And I'm like, says who?
Also, a lot of these books aren't that well written. And I'm really quick to put it down after, a lot of times if you read the first third of it, you're still like, okay, I get it. Right. You don't need to go all the way to the end because it just kind of repeats itself in different ways. And if you're listening out there and you're like me, I think there's a lot of value in picking up these books. I read them all on my Kindle because they're easy to download. You can download the free sample and oftentimes you can get a ton of value out of the first chapter, right? And you don't even have to buy it. That's a productivity hack.
There you go. Nice hack.
But the good ones, that are good and you want to buy it. And most of the time they're whatever, $10 on a Kindle. They're so valuable to get one idea that you can share with a business partner that solidifies that relationship that turns into referrals. I mean, it's such a good way to spend your mental energy in a lot of cases.
I do. I think people, I think there is equity in personal development. I think if you develop yourself and you learn more than you knew yesterday, it puts you in a position to help other people. It gives you perspective you didn't have. And I think that ultimately, whether it's financial equity or relational equity, you actually put yourself in a position to have more opportunities, more asset in whatever it is that you're developing. Right. So I do think that's good. I think that's the positive of personal development.
I have another thing that's kind of come up this year more than ever, really. As my kids are getting older, I'm getting a little bit more kind of bandwidth back in my life. I don't have to manage just the minute to minute logistics of parenting.
Right.
I'm starting to kind of come up for air and think about the back half of my kids' home life, because my daughters are 9 and 11 right now. Actually, they're 9 and 10, almost 11. But it's like they're halfway to college at this point. So
Right.
I'm on like the back 9 of kids at home, and to use a golf metaphor. And so I'm starting to think about what is this going to look like, as we start to think about middle school and all these big changes coming up, and teenager life. And I don't know, I'm starting to think back to my own middle school and teenage life. And I was raised in going to church, and I always just had sort of a mixed attitude about it. I enjoyed my group of friends there.
Yeah.
And there was a youth group that I went to, and there was a guy that ran it who I really, really looked up to, and was a really important person in my life. And looking back, I didn't recognize it at the time, but looking back, he was a really important sort of non-parental role model for me.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of bringing that to my kids. And we don't go to church. I've really I grew up in North Carolina where everything's really traditional. And then I moved out west, and going to church is no longer the norm. It's sort of like an exception to the rule. So I'm starting to kind of get an itch to reconnect with that part of my life. But I got to tell you, I struggle with it so much, man. I struggle with the language of churches. Yeah. And the language of the New Testament is just like baffling to me.
Yeah, I hear that. It leads you, I don't know if you want to share, but it leads you were talking about a mortgage thing. You went to your coach, and you guys were able to like you're experiencing a spiritual growth or spiritual conversation. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. In different places. And that's part of personal development. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm in this other coaching group right now. It's called Mortgage Mastermind Elite. If you're a lender and you're listening to this and you're thinking about coaching, look it up. It's awesome. And so it's me and 11 other people from across the country. And twice a month we get together kind of like this on a web meeting. And we have a shared topic and go over tactics, and super valuable. And all of the other members of the group, we all kind of contribute to each other in different ways. And it's really powerful to have a group instead of just a one-on-one coaching kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the woman who runs it, Cindy, is just a super experienced and powerful mortgage lender out of Southern California. And she's on this path as well. And anyway, we do a retreat at her house a couple times a year. And we just got back from the last one a few weeks ago. And one of the first things we did when we all sat down together was we did a 2-hour session with an energy healer, right? And he explained, all the different chakras, and there was like crystals and stuff. And he was like an intuitive spiritual guide of some kind. And it was, it was really foreign to me. And I was kind of like, what is going on here? What have I gotten myself into? But like I said, it was hard to deny what happened in the room for those 2 hours. I mean, this guy just like went one-on-one with everybody, and there was a lot of emotional outbursts, and it was really profound. It was strange. And it really got me thinking. It really shook me up, man. It rattled my cage.
Yeah.
And I thought it was fascinating.
I feel, that's the kind of stuff where like, if you really press into personal development, right? Like and you really start to look at things that you're not familiar with, you'll find experiences that are either like, you're like, oh, that was fascinating, and I'm not sure what I think of it yet, but I can't deny like the results or the whatever it was. Like, I think that's, and that can be a boom or bust type of feel. Like, it felt like a bust because it was weird, but.
Well, it's the same way I feel about a lot of people in my own family who are born again Christians. And it's like, I get that something profound happened decades ago, and like it puts you in a different trajectory, and you're still on it, and it's still part of your life, and it like it worked.
Right.
And it works. It continues to work. I mean, I don't deny the power of that for people. It just, and I've always been sort of like, I wonder why did that never happen to me? Like, I don't know. Like, I just kind of shrug my shoulders. It's the same kind of thing where you're like, wow, that's really fascinating. And I don't know why.
Right.
I don't know why doesn't everybody have this? I don't know.
Right. But that's because,
that also goes to what we talked about earlier, where we talked about personal development, and it's, in some ways it's a luxury, or is it, you know, I mean, it feels like a luxury in America to take the time to better yourself. And I guess that's why maybe Oprah is so powerful, is because she just like took it to the masses, and it wasn't always personal development, but it became personal development. And that's when she really kind of went into this other stratosphere of engagement and power with her audience.
I think,
but I also think of like, there's other countries where spirituality is much more intertwined with just the day-to-day fabric of the community.
Right.
In a way that certainly West Coast United States is not.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I think the luxury piece of it is just how we think of it, maybe in business, as business people. Like, we pay for conferences, we pay for books, there's a lot of things that money provides the luxury of, this learning experience. But I think even in other countries, even if you don't have as much money or money at all, there are ways you can develop yourself. I think the development is about where you look, how you be about it all, right? Like, are you willing to challenge yourself in your current perspectives and kind of evolve into more truth, you know? Whatever that truth is. Like, everybody has their own truth. So are you willing to press in and look for what's there?
We have access to so much right now in this time of life. I mean, if we just went back 100 years, I mean, most people in America were just like living in the mud.
Yeah, that's good. I would say, like, from that perspective, I mean, if you go back to like Maslow's hierarchy thing, like, you know, when you struggle to make your needs, your basic needs met,
right.
It's harder to engage in the conversation of like spiritual development or personal growth. But that's not to say that people that were in those places didn't. It's just, maybe that's the luxury you're speaking of. It's,
I mean, sometimes I feel like all of this modernity in our lives is creating access to new conversations, new people, new information, but it's also removing us. I mean, there's a huge spike in depression. I'm sure it's because of social media. I'm sure of it. Has to be. It's like, there's like a public health issue around social media, man. It's like, it's bad. And the people that I said live in the mud, like, they're connected to the circle of life and connected to nature and weather systems.
More present. They're probably
connected to profound universal truth in a way that I won't say I'll never be, but it's much more difficult for me to access that.
That's interesting. Was it, did they use it? I can't remember if there was like a correlation between people who have a lot of money and unhappiness, like, you know, where you try to acquire money and you're hoping that it's going to produce something, but then you actually look at it and you realize, like, money wasn't the answer. Money didn't create that happiness that you were hoping.
I can't remember where I heard this, but it's something about like $75,000 a year. Like, if you're below $75,000 a year, getting to 75 creates a significant amount of happiness. But then beyond that, it like goes off a cliff. Like, it's like as soon as it kind of like you're paying bills and you're on top of the ball. The rest is, I mean, in some ways meaningless.
Right. I think that's the bust of personal development. It's like, if you're doing it because you're following the masses, and you're doing it because that's what somebody told you have to do to be successful. And it just becomes this hamster wheel that you can't get off of. Like, you have to think about, why does personal development matter for you? Because otherwise you're doing what everybody else is telling you to do, and you're not owning the journey. You're not being present to the lessons. You're just reading books and going to conferences because you think that's what you're supposed to do to be successful, you know?
Yeah. Or you just identify. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I've recognized there are a lot of people in this business that I follow that's all they do is personal development. That's it, you know? But for me, personal development is like, eating food and listening to music.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. I
It's
love
not
that.
just getting better at
Yeah.
selling,
Right. Right. I love that.
and
So
it's, so yeah, so it's different. It can be a lot of different things, but, and then that's another part of the curse of social media is now I can see all these other people demonstrating and signifying their personal development in ways that, I don't know, seem a little aggressive sometimes, but, I think, it gets into that Simon Sinek, the idea of why is the most powerful thing of all. Like, why do we want to develop ourselves? Why are we doing what we do? And if we can really get connected to that, and it's really hard to know why, it's like, it's super random how I found myself in the mortgage business.
Yeah.
It was just sort of like, a low barrier. I was kind of at loose ends in my career. My parents were always in real estate growing up.
Yeah.
My dad was an agent when I was really, really young. He ran, he was like the principal broker at a real estate office in the 70s. And then in the 80s, he got more into home building and commercial development. And then when I was a teenager, my mom became an agent and was, that's always just sort of been the conversations around the house and the professional backdrop of my life.
Yeah.
And when I moved to Portland, I got a sales job right away, and it was in telecom. And then that pivoted into tech. I got a business development job for like a web development company for about a year. And then that kind of petered out. And I was like, I'll just get my real estate license and see what happens, as most people do.
Right.
And I had a friend who was in mortgages, and he was like, oh man, I can get you a job on Monday. Like, you don't have to get a license. Just show up. Like, I'll tell him to like keep a desk open for you.
Nice.
I was like, oh, I'll check that out then.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
See what happens there. And here I am. That was 16 years ago. So Christian, if you're listening, shout outs to Christian for getting me in the business.
Way to go, Christian.
He's still in the business too. He's doing great.
I feel like, this is if we had to wrap this conversation up like this, I would say, and maybe you can wrap yours up with a thought too, but, I feel like personal development is just that. It's personal, right? It's become this whole industry, right? But you, listening to this, have your own things that add value to your life and cause you to grow as a human being. And it's more about that than it is about the industry of it all. So, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Chris. Let's just put a bow on it with that.
Put a bow on it. Well, listen, I think people are always interested in doing business with people who think for themselves and are still committed to the process of growth as a human being, which is you. If people want to reach out to you for mortgages, or even they just want to have coffee with you because they like the way you think about life, how do people reach you?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I started a podcast because I love talking, and I love talking to people about big ideas, and reach out and call me. You can find me online at pdxhomeloan.com. That is my home base as a mortgage originator here in the Portland, Oregon area. So James at PDX Home Loan would be an easy way to email me, and we can get something scheduled.
Love it. Good stuff, man. Thank you I like the transparency of it. Thanks for that. That's really cool. I hope we have more conversations like this.
Me too, man. Thanks, Chris.
See you, James. Thanks.